There are the agenda items President Obama seeks and the ones he must confront, like the now staggering body of evidence that our country tortured under the previous administration and in a systematic way. In our third story on the countdown, the president tonight offered his latest attempt to frame the issue while new evidence keeps rising to the surface. First, the president, when asked whether the previous administration had sanctioned torture.
Waterboarding violates our ideals and our values. I do believe that it is torture. I don't think that's just my opinion. That's the opinion of many who've examined the topic. And that's why I put an end to these practices. I believe that waterboarding was torture. And I think that whatever legal rationales were used, it was a mistake.
But add this to the vast landscape of interlocking evidence, a document from the ACLU trove of records on this subject, spotlighted today by Jason Leopold of the publicrecord.org, an email dated May 22, 2004, in which a senior FBI agent stationed in Iraq seeks further guidance about what interrogation techniques may be used. The email notably refers 6 times, to an executive order. President Bush is specifically named, quote, executive order signed by President Bush, which authorized the following interrogation techniques, among others: sleep management, use of MWDs, military working dogs, stress positions such as half squats, environmental manipulation such as the use of loud music, sensory deprivation through the use of hoods, etc. The email could have significant implications, particularly since it followed the revelations of abuse at Abu Ghraib. The email seeks guidance on whether FBI agents in Iraq were required to report harsh interrogations that may have violated FBI standards, but were within the guidelines of that executive order. The understanding of the email's author is that these enhanced interrogation techniques approved by the executive order were, quote, still on the table, but that certain techniques can be used only if very high-level authority is granted. The author of the email claims that FBI personnel have had no direct involvement in the Abu Ghraib abuses. The email points to the evidence of a direct link between President Bush and specific interrogation techniques employed in Iraq. Let's turn now to MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
That email and the nugget it contains, or nuggets in a moment, but President Obama and the news conference first. The 3 answers that he gave on torture tonight, including one on state secrets, did they represent a shift in this balancing act that he's tried to maintain on this subject, and why is he still out there on the tightrope?
Well, first of all, there is a shift against what I think has become a fairly widespread idea that he was going squishy on using the word torture. I saw no sign that he was shying away from describing these so-called techniques as what they are, which was torture. And secondly, I respectfully disagree with what Chris Matthews suggested. One of the ideas that is very pervasive, was at the time, is still now, is that somehow, under duress, presidents of any kind have to use or have to reserve torture as one of the tools in the toolbox. Well, he went to some length to explain this anecdote about Winston Churchill. And he said Churchill was under incredible duress. London was being destroyed. He held detainees, but he said Britain didn't do that because that's not what it represented. I think that was a very clear explanation, as clear as he would want to make it moving forward, that no matter what the situation, no matter how imminent the threat, no matter how dire the circumstances, he wasn't prepared to do that kind of thing. So to the extent that there's a shift there, I think it's resetting the debate about how these decisions get made, because we have to think back to the post-9/11 era. Everyone says, well, you know, the last remaining defense is that things look very good now, that looks very bleak then. That's the moment a country gets tested. What this president is saying, you can keep your values even in the time of duress.
And yet, to borrow a phrase from journalism, as willing and as he has been to go into the depth that he has, including this description of this as torture, to describe legal rationales for it as a mistake, to make that Churchill analogy, which is also a political flush in a card game, given who Churchill is always quoted by in this country.
Right.
All of those elements, he's buried the lead. He will not answer that question. Is waterboarding as a torture, did that mean the previous administration sanctioned torture? It would seem to be a natural conclusion from everything else he said. Why is he not prepared to write the opening paragraph of the story?
Well, on one level, I think there is a desire to move the debate beyond the question of to prosecute or not to prosecute. They want to have a debate about what the values of this country are and will be, and what's appropriate in national security given those values. There is, of course, a legal jeopardy here. And to prejudge a case, to get drawn into a legal issue any more than they already are and will be, is something they're reluctant to do, partly for political reasons, partly for legal too. Having said that, no matter what their concerns are, they're already sucked into this one. In Spain, the judge that pursued Pinochet in Chile is now saying that because of the memos that have been released, what we once knew by intuition, the judge said, we now know for a fact. So whatever happens, this administration, this president, what they have released and what they have said is going to be part of a legal proceeding, whether here or overseas, on this question of the legal liability of senior Bush administration officials.
And to that point, we will see, obviously, what, if anything, develops from that FBI email. But assuming its authenticity, this describes techniques approved by an executive order that seem to mirror some of the abuses right out of Abu Ghraib. But pardon me, what executive order was this?
Well, there's obviously a lot we don't know. It's pretty clear from the public reports, from the news reports, that the methods of Guantanamo Bay and presumably from these CIA sites were exported to Abu Ghraib. If anyone has the belief that this was somehow some enterprise concocted somewhere in the Pentagon or on the ground, then over time, if they don't see it already, we are going to see this go up to the highest possible levels. That is very clear. Whether it's this executive order or something else, what's going to change the politics, I think, is putting together President Bush's statements at the time, blaming some low-level people, or Donald Rumsfeld saying at the time that it was just because these people had digital cameras that it was so shocking. Putting that together with the the private paperwork that is now coming out, that's what's going to change people's opinions, because people will see that, frankly, there was a deception going on, and I think the politics will change as a result.
And a constant deception. There might have as well been a cabinet-level position in charge of deception. Perhaps there was. Richard Wolff of MSNBC, as always, great thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Keith.